I want to just say like we're recording this on Valentine's Day. There's going to be a lot of love.
I hope so. I hope so.
Welcome back to a somewhat love-drenched episode of Radio Juxtapoz. My name's Doug Gillen. Coming up today, Evan Pricco joins forthcoming Juxtapoz cover artist Christian Rex van Minnen. This isn't Christian's first appearance on the Radio Juxtapoz podcast, but it has been a couple of years, and we thought it was a pretty good time for a refresher. To be honest, I want to let the guys get straight into this one because it's a real journey that takes us from Plato's cave through the Reformation, landing somewhere on gummies. As with most art podcasts, it always helps if you have a quick scan over the artist's Instagram page before jumping in, and this one is no different. If you like it, let us know, subscribe, share the love, and most importantly, enjoy the episode. This is Evan Pricco in conversation with Christian Rex van Minnen for Radio Juxtapoz.
I want to call this like an emergency podcast because we're doing this in a rush because you're the cover of the next issue of Juxtapoz.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I feel the love. I'm so grateful for so much, but thanks, man.
How are you doing? Like you and I, we've known each other for years. Like, how are you doing? How are things? How's life? How's painting life? Just load it. Let's just go in. Let's do it.
It's good. With life, I'm good. Life's rich, interesting, strange, bewildering, complicated, exciting, scary. I don't know.
Can I ask you something that I think I really, when you said it this morning, that you procrastinate? Like, I don't, do you really?
I mean, if it has to do with correspondence, absolutely. I put off as much of that as I can for as long as I can until I hit that critical moment where things could get bad, and then do it all at once. That's been my MO for years. I'm not sure really how to change that. It's a conscious effort to focus my time in only a couple directions.
Are you good at deadlines?
Yes, very. I don't miss deadlines. There's like a kind of brutal prioritization protocol in my life,
Well, I mean, okay, first off, I interrupted a Valentine's Day hike.
It rained us out, man. It's
okay.
A soggy one here in Santa Cruz. So
okay, well then I don't feel that bad then.
Where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles. I have felt that I feel all the things that you just said about life. It feels like there's a lot of things to be slightly uncertain about. Feels like there's a lot of things to kind of question. But the one thing that you cannot deny is that you have a studio practice by which you've had for years now that gets more and more elegant, complicated, and beautiful, and messy, and disgusting, and great all at once. Still, what keeps you motivated? Like, how are you staying locked in and motivated? Or do you feel now that you've done it for so many years, like you feel that you can let go a little bit more?
I wish I could respond to that as if it were a static thing. I think everything has the potential now to be completely upended. I've learned what has motivated me in the past was largely fear.
Fear of what?
I think it's more of the faceless archetype of fear. I mean, fear of economic insecurity, fear of destitution, fear of a lack of meaning, a fear of not fighting the good fight. Yeah, a lot of fear. There's a lot of like gratification in the process of painting, but I don't think I'm alone in that sentiment in terms of what motivates us to work. And I think that's I'm in the process of consciously unraveling that. So I don't know what will motivate me in the years to come. I'll put myself out of business by being too well.
Did you ever have a fear in your ability though?
No. I mean, it's like you see these, like, I've seen improvement in the little way and in the big way. And that hasn't been disproven in my experience. So again, like, I don't know, maybe there is an end to that. I don't know. I don't want to test fate in that way, but here we are. Yeah, I don't know. It's largely been unconscious, which is a scary thing when you start to look at it.
How much do you allow? I mean, because I was thinking about this like last night, sitting in bed. It's about 11:30, and I watched like the opening monologue for Jon Stewart, because Jon Stewart just took over the Daily Show again. And I watched the opening monologue, and he said some things, as he is wont to do. He made fun of the current climate of politics in America.
Donald Trump is not an old man.
He's an old man. He is objectively an old man.
But then he also ended on a really, really strong moment of hope that no matter what happens in the given year, there are still good people out there trying to do good things.
I've learned one thing over these last 9 years, and I was glib at best and probably dismissive at worst about this. The work of making this world resemble one that you would prefer to live in is a lunch pail job, day in and day out.
Do you feel a sense of positivity outside of maybe your own daily sphere? Or do you feel pretty rattled by what you see?
I'm get hung up on the words. So positive is a tricky one.
Yeah, of course.
And I, just tracking back to the beginning of your question, I don't think good people and bad people is a static thing either. I think that can be, there's a bright side and a dark side to that. Everybody can change for the better or for the worse. Generally, I think, yeah, I'm a pretty positive person. It's just, I have accepted that we are not going to be able to understand the changes at hand cosmically and as a species, as souls. Some of it is outside of our ability to comprehend that. I think I'm just in awe, of it all. I don't know if that's a positive feeling or a negative feeling. It's intense,
Did fatherhood change you?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I mean, in which way? Which way are you asking? In terms of if I have a positive outlook on life?
Did it give you more of I would say, did fatherhood give you more of an opportunity to see the wonder and awe around you because you were not only trying to facilitate that feeling to your children, or was it something that it kind of, it just illuminated things that illuminated wonder for you?
I think I've always had that. And I know that that's what, if there's one thing that I can share with my children, it is that. But what comes with becoming a parent is the magnitude of protecting that. I realize how hard it has been for me to protect my heart, to protect my soul in this world, to navigate this path. It's incredibly difficult. I've been given a lot of opportunity, and it's a fucking miracle that I've arrived where I'm at in the state that I'm at. And just knowing that I have to look after my children in that way to protect them, protect their hearts and minds. It's a big thing, but there's no choice in the matter. I wouldn't say that having children all of a sudden was this switch that flipped where it's like, oh, fuck, I better adopt and fabricate a positive personality quickly, a positive worldview. Right. It's all been there. Right. I think you have to learn how to articulate it more clearly. Just, I think anytime you want to teach something, you're going to learn it more intimately by having to divulge, by having to make it understandable. Having a deeply inarticulated positive worldview has to become articulated for your children and for the people that you love. And that's a difficult process.
It sounds almost like a silly question, but I think it just, so many people are in wonder of your technical ability. They're in wonder of the image making that you create. Like that, just this, you are a very unique painter. It sounds simple, but what are you painting right now? Like what is it that you feel like you're painting these days?
Unity. This collapse of duality, an attempt to transcend duality, attempt to present something that is neither positive nor negative, but whole and ecstatic. I think that's, in my view, what ecstasy is, or faith, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of it. You can't parse it out. You can't pick and choose. It's all one. That's what I feel deeply. And that's what I'm trying to express. I think that the surrealistic approach to art allows for that. It allows for that to come through, that strange dance between the subconscious and conscious mind, intuition and counterintuition. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to paint, is that those states. But trying is not the word, because it's not really an intellectual endeavor. It's an action-based thing. I think the intellect dips its hands in and out of the process in different proportions. Does that make sense?
It does. But it's so funny when you're saying this. I was remembering the times when you used to do, like, when you used to paint and interact with comments on Instagram. And I was always wondering, was that did that sort of performance and interaction, in a way, did that break what would be this kind of intuitive and counterintuitive kind of method? Like, was that an attempt for you to kind of break out of your sort of overwhelming individuality while you were painting? What was that act, and how does that affect what you do now? Because I was so fascinated by you doing that.
Yeah. Thanks. I think that it's not so much like an interruption as much as a realistic depiction of what the deep interpersonal life and this noetic expression of noetic truth, coupled with surviving on the internet like the rest of us, surviving with social media. And that, this process, this indirect painting technique, is built with layers. And that's a very appropriate way for me to express this feeling of having these layers in life, I wouldn't have a career without social media. Hard stop. Without you, I wouldn't have a career without you and social media. Like, no way. That's a big part of my life. I'm not a monk. I'm not an ascetic. I'm not living in isolation. I don't have a huge social life, but what does exist is largely on social media. So having that exist, having that conscious interface on the skin of those portraits, which was mostly portraits, seemed to be a very accurate depiction of the totality of my experience as an artist. I regret a lot of that. I don't think I'll be doing that again. It was just a introduction of chaos, just more and more it's just like, how much of this, everything can I fit into this? Like, how much can I bring in? And now, things change. I'm kind of like, how do I get out?
Yeah.
How do I get away?
Yeah.
But I don't I have mixed feelings about it, man. I really do. I don't know what to do. I think a lot of us are in that position right now.
Do you feel like, let's go back, we've probably known each other since 2008 or so, I would assume. And I think careers ebb and flow, and there are moments where you're like, oh, I don't know why I did that, but it was good that I did it. I don't know what, but I won't want to go back into doing that. If you look at your 2008 self and you look at your 2024 self, are you feeling like, you just had a really, really fantastic solo show in Madrid. The work seems to get more and more there's a richness to your work now it seems to get more and more articulated as you get older. But do you look back at the kind of 2008, 2009, 2010, and you kind of think about all the artists that you showed with the galleries and everything, do you feel that this world of painting is getting more interesting to you? That was a really roundabout way of asking that question.
Are you saying the community of painters and contemporary painting, or painting just generally?
Painting just generally.
Yes and no. I'm incredibly grateful that figuration and craft is back in the way that it is. But oftentimes I see it as just a vehicle for more propaganda. I'm not thrilled about that.
Elaborate there, please.
I don't see a lot of the artist in the work. I mean, as the figuration proliferates, it's like in service of something else. And
Mhm.
fuck, man, there's room for extroverts. There's room for everything in the art world. It's an ecology. I truly believe that. I don't have to like it all. I want to see evidence of the human heart and soul in painting. I want to see that. That's what I like. That's what I am hungry for. That's what gives me solace. It gives me connection. If I don't see that, it's just junk food. So it's a mixed blessing that figuration is back the way that it is. And maybe that, I don't think that anything has really changed. It's, in 2007 or 2008, it was like this overwhelming excitement that there was something happening. There was this bubbling coming up from the underground. And I rode that wave, in a egotistical fury, paddle, 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 right? And I caught that wave. Now it's fun. That was really fun, super fun. But that sort of competitive spirit isn't there for me anymore. I don't know what I'm competing with, but like, a lot of that stuff was infused with my own ego and just desperation to be seen and to get traction, to climb out of working a landscape job or driving a fucking truck. I wanted out of that. I wanted nothing but to paint. So it was a very not fully conscious way of being, but it was in my 20s, so I don't blame myself too much for that. I think everybody goes through that.
Do you remember do you remember the first time you did some sort of painting where you realized like, oh my God, I think this is it. Like I think I can no longer have another job. Like this is it.
Yeah, I mean,
and how long has that feeling
like,
lasted? Like,
well, not so much anymore because everybody's so fucking good. It was like when I kind of like cracked the code on indirect painting in my own weird way, which was just this love affair with Rembrandt, that whole history. I was like, holy fuck, I got it. Like, there's no way anybody can stop me. This is like, and of course it was that kind of thinking, like externally considering. But yeah, that was the hugely motivating moment in 2007, 2008, when all of a sudden I realized I could do this because it was rare, that type of painting at that moment. But now it's not so rare. And craft is like at an incredible level.
It's an amazing thing, actually, that you just
unique.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that you said, because in 2007, if you told somebody, well, I really want to paint like Rembrandt, or it's like people would have been like, what the fuck, what are you talking about? It like just wasn't. It seems crazy now, because now it's like people would be like, oh yeah, like it's just so different, like how that moment in time, if you would have said to out loud to many people, I really want to paint like Rembrandt, people would be like, I mean, okay. Like, it just wasn't a thing.
But you've seen it. I mean, you saw the elbowing in of whatever that is. And then it just kind of got co-opted, and now I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't want to come off as being bitter or cynical. It's like the yin yang, right? That little emergence and disappearance thing. Now it is the thing. And so what is not the thing? Because that will be the thing real soon.
Was there a particular show that was like kind of the one for you, where it feels like there was something that you can look back on and be like, that was a show that really kind of maybe allowed myself to become more myself?
It was seeing a Odd Nerdrum book at the Denver Public Library. This is how I was getting my information. I went to the Denver Public Library just looking for books on people like Rembrandt. And when I saw Odd Nerdrum, I saw that like someone had picked up the torch. I mean, 300 years after Rembrandt. And that was hugely inspiring. His whole concept of on kitsch. I don't know. Have you read that?
I think we might have actually published it on the website at one point.
That's profound. I mean, and it illustrates what he was up against as an artist. I mean, I'm not a scholar on Odd Nerdrum. I don't know a whole lot about his life, but I do know that when he came up in the 80s, it was a hard sell. So that kind of figuration, especially references to the esoteric and figuration, the sort of like gloomy quality. He was really marginalized, kind of still is. And I think Giger is the same way, weirdly.
He's had a little bit of a
Yeah.
renaissance, but yeah, Odd Nerdrum seems to always be on the periphery of, like, there's people who acknowledge his sort of influence on a new generation of painters, but he doesn't often get put into sort of that institutional sort of language now. I mean, there's some of his works in museums, but it is interesting the way his sort of influence has been so great to a generation of people, but he's not necessarily always highly considered outside of that influence.
Why do you think that is?
I think there is, because when he came up, the world was focusing on a different style of painting, whether that was Richard Prince, whether that was Basquiat, whether that was David Sau. I don't quite know. I think and all those people are good and interesting, and I find some beautiful stuff in all that work. But I think Odd Nerdrum he was at a time when it just wasn't necessarily being paid attention to as more of a market kind of thing. Just the way, like, Mark Wright and Robert Williams in the early 90s kind of come in, and they kind of they generate a good wave. And Odd Nerdrum was kind of behind that wave, I would say.
I should mention, Wright, and then as one of those people like Nerdrum who kind of, when I discovered this sort of hidden art world, was all about the same time. In the 80s, it's like, it's funny because it just did not go with the whole cocaine culture. Right. This is a guy who's kind of gloomy. It's about the depths and muck of soul transformation. Wall Street people high on cocaine did not want that message. They don't give a fuck about that. Yeah. So it's like, and now here we are in the psychedelic renaissance, and I think the art is generally in line with that.
I think, too, that politics played such a big role in it because of the way that the Reaganomics kind of Thatcherism sort of era, where where industry was being stripped away and people were, the gaps between rich and poor were getting greater and greater. I think there was just a certain kind of flash that people were getting attracted to. And Odd Nerdrum's was a slow process, a slow burn, and I think the world was moving so fast that I think now too, things are moving so fast that I'm curious what's going to happen to painting because of the speed by which everything is going, and also just the massive disparity of belief, of care, of money. Like, it seems like I don't know what era this is. I don't know what it matches.
I don't know either, man. I have no idea what the fuck is going on.
I thought, like, when the pandemic was happening, I thought what was going to be the kind of a sort of roaring 20s moment where we would come out of a deeply dissatisfying world event, and there would be some sort of conversation of collective sort of indulgence, and it's happening. It's just not happening the way I thought it would.
What do you mean collective indulgence?
Like, in the 20s, you had this sort of post World War I, post Spanish flu, where so many people had died, so much had changed in terms of the way people could die because of the war, that you had like the Jazz Age, you had the sort of prohibition, you had all these kind of like debaucherous sort of I guess this debauchery that was bubbling up, and people had like this pent up sort of like, well, what is life? And here, this is what it's going to be, is it's going to be kind of unhinged, celebratory sort of life. There was going to be, obviously it was going to be sort of challenged by writers and musicians and all these different people and painters. All that stuff was happening in the 20s. Was so fascinating. And there was some, even across racial divides, there was interesting things happening. And then I don't know what's going on now.
You know what I was thinking, as I like the 20s, the allusion to the 20s as like a parallel. I I don't know where I was listening to a podcast about like what it was like on the ground in the decades following the Protestant Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
the Reformation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that we kind of paraphrase that history as like, it was a check on indulgences in the Catholic Church, mechanisms through which people could connect with God. And what's fascinating is how out of control that got. And there's these situations throughout European cities where it just got fucking wild. It's like everybody's talking to God and everybody is following the guy with the biggest ear to God. And it was absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. I mean, unimaginable horrors and hilarity all at once. I don't think we're far from that. I think that what we are approaching is, I think destabilization would be insufficient of a word.
I think so too. Well, look, the 20s also gave us the rise of fascism. So,
yeah.
But and the thing is that the fascism at the time, what made it so elevated was the advent of what slowly became the advent of television, of different uses of media. And obviously now fascism is spread through different forms of media, new media, all these different ways in which media can reach people. So there's some very dark parallels. It's amazing that we give people tools and they immediately go back to like the reason why the tool was created in the first place, which was to stop the thing from happening. And then we just kind of use it for the same thing over and over again.
And yet there's incremental progress.
Absolutely.
And yet there is incremental progress. It's not a straight line, but as long as there's just a small percentage more of light than dark, everything's going to be okay. And that's my view.
And do you feel that?
Yeah, I do. It's going to get ugly, but this is a refinement process. This is a next great leap in human evolution, and it's going to be fucking ugly, but beautiful and liberate, like true liberation. We're at the cusp of that, but we don't know what that means yet, and it's going to blow people's minds. It's going to be hard to take.
I've always thought of you as someone with an ancient soul. Give me a second here. With an old ancient soul from perhaps maybe from the wrong era, but completely okay and understanding of the era he's in. And like I feel like I always like your opinions about like where we are right now and like how you don't sugarcoat it, but you seem fascinated by the time, even though I think of you as an old soul.
All right. Yeah.
Go,
I don't know.
go ahead with
the question. What's the question?
There is no question. The question is, do you feel like somebody who, I don't know, just when you're a man in your 20s and you're saying and Rembrandt's and Odd Nerdrum are the one you're looking at, like it's just that's an old soul. I think that's an old soul. I think that someone you're kind of, but you're always of the moment. You're not hiding from now. It's like you're not wearing like you're not wearing like you're not dressed in some sort of uniform that makes you seem like you're from a different, you know what I mean? Like you seem fascinated with now.
Yeah. Wow. I don't think things have changed that much, I think it's the same old story. Yeah, I'm definitely fascinated in the old and how we got here and how it's a very flimsy perception to view it linearly.
Mm-hmm.
You take that line and put it on the end and it's a single point. It's all the same thing. It's all the same forces interacting through us towards something, to use a linear language. I don't have anything else but that, but yeah, I don't, it all adds up to this, you know what I mean? I am going back, like I'm reading a lot about ancient philosophy, to try to understand how we got here. I guess I don't know why everybody's not doing that.
What are you reading? Like, what is something that, give me an example.
Pythagoras, Plato, Hermetics. You know, my interest in Rembrandt opened me up to the Dutch Golden Age and that whole history of painting, and particularly in composition. And I started to notice all these things, is particularly within the geometry of composition, that is pointing to something much older and much deeper. And that brought me to Hermetics and Pythagoras. And I think that these painters, while successful in their time, were hiding things in their paintings to carry these messages forward. You know, this was a dangerous time to be a painter. So, you know, my own interpretation of those works, that's where that has led me. I don't know. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, but okay. So then let's
But,
so let's just say this. For example, let's say 500 years into the future, somebody sees a Christian Rex Van Minnen painting, the one that's going to be the one that's on the cover of Juxtapoz for this issue. What is something that you're hiding in it for people to find? And do you even know what you're hiding?
No, I don't. I think that I'm representing just being very confused, and a confused man in action. My whole worldview is crumbling. I mean, and I think everybody's will too. It's a flimsy worldview that I was born into.
Mm-hmm.
Flimsy as fuck.
Yeah.
And it's falling apart, and I'm piecing it together, something new. And this is what it looks like, you know? I'm pointing back to those painters and paintings. They were very smart people, very, very intelligent people, far more intelligent than I am. So the best I can do is point back to them, and they are themselves are pointing back even further. And then you start to see that it is a succession. There's this long line of people who have carried this, I mean, for lack of a better word, the esoteric, right, which is hidden knowledge to know oneself and know who we are. That's been suppressed for centuries, and it still is.
Yeah.
And I'm scared, honestly. Like I'm not. I don't think that we are in a truly safe place to express a lot of this stuff.
Do you think, I've always wanted to know this, like, what was Plato distracted by?
Distracted by?
Like today, even the best of thinkers is distracted by bright, shiny lights of something. What was Plato distracted by?
Fear of death, fear of execution.
I would have said fear of execution would have been my
his
top
mentor,
yeah,
Socrates, executed
right
for this very thing we're talking about. So in his books, you have the consensus version of what you read, and then you have what's behind it, what's really behind the allegory of the cave. People can talk about it, and the reason it was an allegory to begin with is because it was a dangerous thing to present.
Right.
Something truly revealing of human nature, of the frightening truth of human nature. The frightening truth of human nature when people are confronted with things they don't want to accept. You know, I think the thing that we forget about that allegory is that people were shown that it was shadows on the cave, and they revolted. They wanted to kill the person who revealed that. It wasn't a joyous moment of liberation. They wanted back, you know, mm-hmm. they wanted it back. Yeah, I think I think that's what Plato was distracted by. What do you think?
No, I mean, I'm always curious about, like, when the people, the thinkers, the philosophers who basically created the closest thing we could kind of consider to be the language in which we can use to talk about the human experience. are those thinkers, right? At least in the Western kind of civilization's understanding of selfhood, like that they are kind of the giants of the time, giants of of our existence. And I'm just wondering, like, when they were on a Wednesday afternoon taking a walk, what were the things going on around them that were the kind of in between things happening in the empires and the civilizations that got them to sort of think differently, that weren't like the most major moments, but like what were like the little things, what were the little annoyances, the little things about society that they were like, I don't know, it seems, because like sometimes, okay, there's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment, but like sometimes when you're like at the grocery store and you get annoyed, right? Let's just say you're at the grocery store, you're in line, you're annoyed. I sometimes go like, well, where's the birth of that annoyance? Not just for me, but for humans in general. Mm-hmm. And I want to know, like, so like, this is ridiculous, but I sometimes wonder, like, was Socrates walking down the street one day and like somebody came out and like asked him something or like got in his way and it like caused him to go into a deep, dark, like wonderful examination of selfhood? That's what I want to know.
Well, from what I understand, Socrates was wild as fuck. If somebody bumped into Socrates on the street and said something, that's where the Socratic method comes from. He wouldn't let it go. He would be in your fucking face and like be hounding you for truth. He'd be that guy. It's easy to get annoyed. I don't know. We just all want it to be so much better, It's so easy to be disappointed. I think everybody has this deep sense that things are not right. Maybe that's been the case all along. I don't know. I don't know when that point in history was when all of a sudden we don't feel like we're at home and at ease and at one with the universe. Yeah. I mean, that I've heard some people suggest that schism occurred during the Enlightenment, but I don't know. I mean, that certainly seems to be the theme of humanity, the general annoyance that things aren't right. This is not okay. Like shit needs to be better.
I haven't even asked you about art, painting, you artist, but I do think like, okay, so many people who I show your work to, especially recently I was showing my girlfriend's dad, who was an art teacher and he's a painter, and I showed him your work and he's like, this fucking guy, this shit's amazing. He loved it. He like loved it. And he was fast, and he was obviously fascinated by the technique and he was fascinated with the visuals that you're getting, but the thing that in our conversations about you, so you were a topic of conversation at Christmas. I want to know, like, what you are known for, like a style and a method that people are just kind of like slightly dumbfounded by and like just absolutely love visually. And it works so well in person and it works really well digitally. But you've done such a good job of like not like falling into like, this is my trap. This is what I do. Like you've always moved it along. Have you been sort of motivated to keep it moving? And you move slowly, which is also great. You're not like trying to like reinvent the wheel every single time, but you add these little parts every single time. How much do you allow people knowing what your style is to kind of peek in a little bit? And how do you break out of that? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure it does.
Okay, you have a style. You have, but like you also changed. Like if you look at your body of work, like it also has evolved so much. But like people kind of are so amazed by the style in which you have and the method and the technique. Like how do you like sort of like block that out when you're painting?
You mean so I'm not driven by satisfying others' expectations?
There you go. That's way
continuity.
Better. Maybe you should be doing the interview.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, painting is such a gift. It's such a giving, surprising thing, that especially this method, which is the essentially versions of the Venetian painting technique. So it's a thing. It's not my thing. It's something that Rembrandt built on, right, and that was sort of like bounced around up until Chardin. It's indirect painting. So yeah, there's method and there's style, right? When we first met, it was like I was much more rigid in it having to be sourced purely surrealistically. Like I had this whole bone to pick with surrealism and the use of that word and what it is and what it isn't. And over the years, I've sort of relaxed that just because that's, I want to give way to whatever I want in the studio. So if it's not sourced from automatic drawing, that's okay. Sometimes it's a hybrid. Sometimes it's purely that. Sometimes it's almost all representational, and fewer and fewer cases of that. And yeah, so it's more about just been expanding that kind of rigid boundary restraints. I like Matthew Barney's word of restraint when describing the creative process. Like, there were restraints in there in the beginning. I think you can go crazy if you don't have restraints. You can go crazy or become too fetishistic about the method, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
if you fetishize the method, you're just going to be painting nudes and, like this sort of stiff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that like the part of me, like I want to impress myself. Like I has to have that punch, that kind of like intense, overwhelming thing. Like I want that for me. And I trust I'm not that different. I'm not that different from anybody else. So I trust that if that works in me, that kind of like, if I can make something that is astonishing, then that's probably going to work in other people. So it's not a cart before the horse thing.
Do you feel like you astonish yourself? Like, do you?
Yeah.
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 And that's why you keep doing it.
Yeah. And the cool thing is this method is like, it looks really fucking kind of boring initially, but I know, like I've done this, it's like this iterative process. I've seen this happen so many times where it's just like suspend your disbelief. Like, yes, this looks stupid and weird and flat. Just keep it going. Just keep showing up every day. And this accretion, this layering by virtue of the method makes spectacular things. Like it has the qualities of believability in it. And that is always satisfying to me and unexpected, if somehow it still is a surprise. What was Leonardo's quote? Like, if the result exceeds your expectation, you're a fucking idiot or something like that. What does he say?
Wow. I don't know if
I might be that.
That's a good quote.
Like I definitely, I think Leonardo said that, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I do surprise myself, I don't know what that says about my intellect or my planning process, but it works. I'm happy with it,
Tell me about the gummies.
Okay. Well, the gummies are a product of a confluence of several things. So I'll first speak to the technical, which is I was fascinated with the difference between Northern Renaissance approach to painting and the Italian Renaissance approach to painting, which I believe is the use of a white ground versus the use of a mid-tone ground. The former allows for greater luminosity, but more rigid application of paint. You can't deviate from the drawing. Whereas the Italians developed the mid-tone ground because they wanted idealized beauty of the human form. So it was less about didacticism and more about the figure itself. So they needed to be able to move an elbow, shift the neck, tilt the head, eliminate a hand, and the mid-tone ground allowed for those kinds of changes in the process. My desire was to hybridize those two, to have a mixed ground. So there are portions of the painting that are on white ground, and there are portions of the painting that are on mid-tone ground. So that's the technical. So that's why the gummies tend to glow, is because they're actually painted on a different ground than everything else. So you have a true luminosity contrast. So the other confluence is conceptual. What I'm always after is increasing contrast in every way? How can I, in terms of not just value, what we typically think of as contrast, but also textural, emotional. I mean, you can kind of go on from there. How do I create contrast everywhere I can? In this case, it was, how do I create something to contrast these chiaroscuroed, heavy, tenebristic forms, the body, the weight of the body? Like what is going to contrast with that? Something that defies gravity, something that is transparent, something that's high chroma, something that's whimsical, almost off-putting whimsical.
Right.
And what's interesting that happened is that what I didn't expect is that what was formerly the grotesque in the flesh, I think it inverted. It became much more sympathetic because the gummies themselves took the role of the grotesque, the repugnant, this sort of like, thickly sweet quality. And I think which engenders the body with more empathy. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
I mean, I think that's actually really, that last part there is so fascinating about how that might have given the viewer the experience of sympathy to the flesh by bringing in this, like you said, whimsical sort of universal object into the painting. I mean, I really don't know what a gummy is. I guess it's an object.
Yeah, it's a liminal substance.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's barely, like, it shouldn't exist. There's no nutritional value. It's like,
shouldn't eat it. Yeah, that's why I had to kind of think about.
It's more like food for the eye, and for some, it's distracting. It's a strange thing. Yeah, but it also stands it takes the place of the flower in a traditional still life, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which was getting back to the technical solution. It was like, how do I create something that is like a flower, that is light, that has a sense of weightlessness, without, you can't accomplish that by building up thick paint, in my view. There's a better way to do that.
Right.
So,
and then, like, that's basically what you've started to do. You've started to make these gummy floral arrangements, I guess is what we could call them. And those have sort of acted as both a very contemporary and also a very classic sort of form of the still life.
Yeah. But why do we worship the old still lifes? Like, why do we look at them? I don't know. There's something like deeply moving to me when I see those things. And again, the hidden knowledge, the esotericism within those paintings is the geometry, is the color triading. There's subliminal things happening that lend this. It draws you in without you even being conscious of it. Similar to the portrait.
Yep.
Stable pyramid, sphere. It gives a sense of quiet and peace and tranquility to communicate with this portrait without even knowing. You automatically approach it in that way. The still lifes are the same thing. There's a sense of inner harmony by virtue of composition that brings you to that engagement with a lot of the work already done.
When you want to talk technique with somebody, who is a peer that you might call or communicate with if you are in need of a tip?
In need of a tip.
Or need to express like more of a not like a philosophical, but more of a technical thing. Who's a peer of yours that technically you might chat with about painting?
Andrew Sendor. Who can really nerd out on the technical. Yeah. And then, I mean, I have a apprenticeship program where we should have a whole nother podcast about this, but it's basically it's a painting nerd fest and trying to dig deeper into all these things.
We should do it like where it's like a roundtable discussion with a bunch of painters.
Yeah. I would love that.
I love that. What's got you excited right now? Like, we can end it on, like, let's end it, because people are gonna see the issue, they're gonna read the interview, they're gonna listen to this interview, they're going to buy the magazine. What is Christian Rex Van Minnen excited about? At least that is sort of something that can leave us on a high note for the next couple months. Cause I don't know. I mean, I can only go a couple months at a time.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm really into what's coming out about extraterrestrials, interdimensionality, AI, all of the nexus point between those three things, I think is very exciting.
Okay.
That's very exciting stuff.
Okay.
You have to discernment is key. But yeah, that's pretty fucking exciting, man. I mean, we're so distracted by so much other stuff. It's hard to just, I mean, it's baffling that that's not front and center. Yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff.
It's amazing that we've gotten ourselves to the point where the thing that we've always wanted to talk about is starting to come out, and we're not even talking about it enough. It's like, what else could there be to talk about besides these things? And we don't, like, we're all so consumed.
Examine that.
Yeah.
Stay with that point right there.
Yeah.
And then follow that. Hey, man, I'm so grateful for you. I don't even know how to really express that. I literally would not be here if it weren't for you. You like literally made my dreams come true. I'm living my dream right now. And that's largely in part to you and your support. I'm super grateful.
I am just really, really happy I've been able to see friends and these wonderful people continue to make art for so long and enjoy the process. And we can all kind of go do this together and kind of figure out what the fuck and have our own little place in the little history of art, whatever the hell this is. That's the joy.
Yeah, well, I'm down, man. I'm down. I'm not going to run off to the hills. You know, I'm not going to quit social media. I'm here for it. I'm down for, like, let's just find a new way. I want to get deeper into it with the heads. I'm not looking to win everybody over, man. I want to like talk to the other true believers, brother.
Christian, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. All my love to you.
Amazing.
That was Christian Rex Van Minnen and Evan Pricco in conversation, taking us on, honestly, one hell of a journey. Be sure to keep an eye out for the latest issue of Juxtapoz featuring Christian Rex Van Minnen on the cover. We'll be back with you guys real soon. Till that moment comes, take care of yourselves and each other.